Okay, we've got a question.
It's like you get to Ottawa and no one can touch you. How will you change that?
You change the people in charge, but you also have to change the system. The first thing I'll do is pass the Federal Accountability Act. It's a real plan to clean up government.
To announce that our government is moving ahead with the first of the commitments contained in the throne speech, namely making the federal government more accountable. Today we tabled in Parliament the new Federal Accountability Act, a bill which contains a large number of measures aimed at cleaning up the federal government. Once implemented, this act will put an end to the influence of big money in federal political parties.
In yesterday's economic update, the Prime Minister indicated that he intends to proceed with more corporate tax cuts. He's going to slash $8 billion from the taxes owed by some of the biggest profitable companies in Canada. And yet at the same time, he's going to raise $26 billion more from Canadians with an EI payroll tax increase and the dreaded HST. So will the Prime Minister come clean? Why is he picking the pockets of Canadians but giving big handouts to the big banks and the oil companies?
This act will put an end to the influence of big money in federal political parties, stop former ministers, ministerial staffers, and senior public officials from using their insider connections to profit from public service.
Tory scandals. The latest, a former Harper aide lobbying for contracts.
Bruce Carson. He's the former aide to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. An APTN investigation discovered information that suggests he planned to use his contacts within the Prime Minister's office and throughout the federal government to help advance the interests of an Ottawa water company.
We talk on a regular basis. I talk to a number of his ministers on a regular basis.
His fiancée and escort stood to make millions through a deal between the company and Indian Affairs. The plan was to sell water filtration units to First Nations communities. Emails obtained by APTN also show that Carson was lobbying officials at Indian and Northern Affairs.
Stop former ministers, ministerial staffers, and senior public officials from using their insider connections to profit from public service. Offer ironclad protection to whistleblowers.
Clearly, Assange is saying there's some significant stuff. Tom Flanagan.
Well, I think Assange should be assassinated, actually. I think Obama should put out a contract and maybe use a drone or something. There's no good coming of this. I agree some of the stuff is quite titillating to read. I was particularly struck by the revelations.
Tom, that's pretty harsh stuff. Just for the record, that's pretty harsh stuff.
Offer ironclad protection to whistleblowers. Give the Auditor General the power to follow the money trail as it relates to federal grants and contributions. Clean up government appointments, contracts, polling, and advertising.
And speaking of which, it now turns out the government is spending $26 million over 3 months promoting the Economic Action Plan, despite the fact that the program is now over. It's gone. It's done. This is like McDonald's spending $26 million telling us they used to sell pizza. So why is the government spending all this money promoting a program that's now over? Apparently it's designed to make us feel good at our own expense, literally because we're the ones picking up the tab. We are paying to be self-medicated here. In case of election, watch this ad.
Clean up government appointments, contracts, polling, and advertising. Extend the scope of the Access to Information Act.
Here's what the Information Commissioner is reporting today. There is a pervasive problem of delays in responding to access to information requests, inappropriate use of time extensions, ill-enforced delegation of authority for decisions. They won't tell Canadians what's going on in Afghanistan. They won't tell Canadians what's going on with Mr. Jaffer's wife. They won't tell Canadians the truth. What's holding them back? Come on, let's get some answers around here.
Extend the scope of the Access to Information Act and establish an independent parliamentary budget office.
This time it's over the cost of those new fighter jets. The parliamentary budget watchdog says the government's been lowballing the price tag by billions. Senior correspondent Terry Malevsky picks up the story. Terry.
Well, Peter, it is sticker shock writ very large. The parliamentary budget officer says the government's estimate for the new F-35 fighters is off, way off, by $13 billion.
We think the total ownership cost will be a little over $29 billion.
Kevin Page is a non-partisan expert whose report was peer-reviewed by other experts. It says the 65 fighters will cost over $29 billion, not $16 billion, as the government claims. And he says the government's flat wrong to say each plane will cost about $75 million.
We have information now, the U.S. Navy saying they think the plane will actually cost in the neighborhood of $130 million per plane, which is roughly what we're estimating an average cost to be.
I'm not going to get into a lengthy debate on numbers.
The Prime Minister brushed off this latest setback and did the same for yesterday's rulings by the Speaker, saying the government hasn't leveled with Parliament.
You win some, you lose some. If you lose, you comply, and that's what we'll do.
$30 billion. It's an obscene amount of money.
The opposition seized on the fighter report as another example of dishonesty.
Our experts stand by their estimates, stand by the projections.
The government said the budget officer's wrong, but offered no detailed rebuttal to show why he's wrong.
And establish an independent parliamentary budget office. Simply put, these and other measures will change the way business is done in Ottawa forever. And they will replace the culture of entitlement that took root under the previous government with a culture of accountability. This is the promise we made to Canadians, and today we are delivering on that commitment.
We're going to keep our budget in surplus. We're certainly not going to embark on deficits.
We will not be running a deficit.
We're not going to go into deficit.
We're not going to run deficits.
We're not running a deficit.
We'll run a substantial short-term deficit this year, which I would estimate at more than $50 billion.